This video from a couple of weeks ago featured Miles, who had gone from 450 to 220 pounds in just 2 years. I wanted to ask him a bunch of questions about his transformation, so he recently featured over on my podcast channel. There's a link in the description. But if you don't have time for that and want just a quick taster of the conversation, here is Miles describing the moment he decided enough was enough at 30,000 feet. And for context, bear in mind this story takes place 1 year after he had almost died during COVID. Actually, was there a moment for you? Was there a, ta-da, today's the day?
There was, kind of. It's weird. But before COVID, I wasn't using a cane. And then about a year later, I was in worse enough shape that I had to use a cane because I had gotten to that point, where I just continued to let my health decline. And I had to walk assisted pretty much everywhere I went. And that was tough. I had come to accept that, when my ticket gets punched, my ticket gets punched. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed, but everyone dies. I'm just going to die earlier than most. And yes, it's going to be my fault. I guess this is just my lot in life. This is what it is for me. And the weirdest thing happened. So I'm on vacation in Mexico in late January 2022. And I'm with my family. And it was like a few days before we're supposed to fly back to the States. And as you can imagine, flying is a horrible experience for somebody my size and for those who have to sit on either side of me. So whenever I flew, I had to make sure I was flying with my wife or my children so that we could raise the armrests and they would just have to get cozy with big old dad, right? And but one of the other issues that you have is you can't fit into an airplane bathroom. Well, everyone started getting sick down in Mexico the last few days that we were there. And it was one of those both ends kind of illnesses. And I was feeling okay, but then I realized I wasn't feeling 100 the night before we were flying out.
I got to say at this point, your story is already sounding worse than the COVID story.
Right, exactly. And so I'm horrified at this point of what, I'm putting the pieces together. 1 + 1 is equaling 2 here. And so I had to go. I had a nephew who was not potty trained yet, and I had to borrow some diapers from my sister and line my pants with my nephew's diapers because I knew that I was at the size where not only could I not functionally use the restroom, I was at the size where I functionally could not fit through an airline restroom door. I could not get in there. It was impossible. It would have required, breaking certain laws of physics in order for that to happen. And so I realized that if I got sick in that manner on the plane, I was going to have to prepare myself to sitting next to my lovely bride, do what I needed to do sitting next to her. And luckily for me, that didn't happen. But as I'm going to the airport, swishing with the stupid diapers inside my pants, for some reason, that was the buck stops here moment. That while I might die and leave my wife and children without a husband and a father, while I might leave them to having to figure out the rest of this world on their own, while I might not be able to play with them, for some reason in that moment, it was not as bad as potentially having to potentially shame my wife or embarrass them or put them in a really uncomfortable position on that plane that day. I can't really tell you why that did it, because when, again, you take a logic and you try to apply logic to the scenario, obviously the first that I described is way worse, that my wife is going to grow, is going to have to live the rest of her life or until she finds somebody much handsomer than I am, without a husband. And my children were all going to go off for the rest of their lives without a father. And yet that wasn't enough. So that doesn't make sense. But that day when I walked to the airplane, I didn't have the Pop-Tarts. And when I went to the convenience shop, when we got back to the States, before I got on my next flight to get home, I grabbed a healthier option. I grabbed something better for me to eat that day. And then when we got to the hotel, I made different choices about the volume of food I was going to eat. Not necessarily eating the right thing, but I ate less that night because it stops today. And that was February 7th of 2022, when I said, no, it's done. And it doesn't make sense.
Anybody that does nonsensical behavior will tell themselves, a narrative that fits that behavior, because you can't go through life nonsensical. You might appear like that from the outside, but to yourself, it has to make sense. And so you will create a story that you're living in, where everything you're doing does make sense. And yeah, well, if I die, it doesn't matter, because that it's just my time. My time is up. Yeah, that's one of the little stories you tell yourself. And yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, you see it a lot with anybody that suffers from an addiction. Well, we'll do the most crazy things, but when you ask them why, we'll have a story. That story won't make sense to you, but to them, it makes perfect sense. And if you put yourself in their shoes, you can see, okay, well, I can see why they would do that. That they would drink too much, because they do think this is, and it all starts to, the jigsaw starts to fit, albeit a jigsaw that only they can ever build. The airplane story I have, which is quite funny because it sticks with me to this day. I used to eat a lot when I traveled. So I'd get to the airport and I'd start stuffing myself, and I'd eat on the plane, and I would eat so much that I would feel uncomfortable. I'd feel bloated and stuffed, but that was just how I lived. I was always bloated and stuffed. And I found myself on an airplane a long time ago, long before 9/11 and the sort of security measures that we have on planes nowadays. And I'm on a plane flying to New York for a holiday, and I'm stuffed already. I've eaten just huge amounts of food, and the couple in front of me start arguing, to the extent that the guy next to his wife or girlfriend, whoever it was, starts becoming quite physical with her. And a flight attendant walked over, and he was only a little guy, and the guy got up and confronted him, and I'm sat behind, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to suddenly turn into a fight. I'm 6'6". I'm a large man. I'm the largest person on this plane. I have a sort of a moral responsibility to intervene if anything goes south here. And it occurred to me that I felt so stuffed that if I got up too fast, I'd probably vomit before anything else. And to this day, I never fly on a plane unless I'm fasted. It does my wife's head in. We go to airport, she'll say, "You having something to give it?" No, I'm getting on the plane. I will not eat before I fly. She'll say, "Why?" I'll say, "Because if someone tries to hijack it or something, I need to be peak condition."
Well, it's one of those things. Like if your plane goes down and you have to get outside that tiny little door in the emergency, how am I supposed to? I struggled at that weight, deciding whether or not I needed to shimmy down the aisle sideways or straight on, because both ways I was just as wide. I was wider in every direction than the aisle was. I was going to scrub people's shoulders all the way down. And I've often had those thoughts when I was that heavy, is if I have to get to that wing emergency exit and go down that slide, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be that whole, I don't know if you remember these old cartoons, but Winnie the Pooh getting stuffed in rabbits, the hole in the rabbit palace. Yeah, that was going to be me. They're going to have to push me from behind to get me to uncork.
Yeah, well, you need Tigger bouncing up and down your ass.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I have so many of those. I can remember going on roller coaster rides and stuff with my kids, and first of all being
walk of shame.
Well, yeah, just worrying that when that thing comes down to lock you in, it's not going to fit because my upper body was too big for it. Yep. And then when I do fit in it, miraculously, then just being worried that nobody that well, yeah, no one that heavy has been on that roller coaster that day. I can guarantee that. I'm the heaviest. So if it is on the verge of breaking, I'm the one that's going to break it, and I'm going to I'll fly off into the ether.
You're wondering what the stress load of those bolts holding that chair in place are, and did the engineer think about me? Did they think about me?
I've been there. It's a horrible place to be. If you enjoyed that, you can watch the full podcast that I recorded with Miles by clicking up here, or watch his weight loss journey video, which is down here.